So, turning to this morning's theme, language and education in Wales. Here we'll acknowledge that language is a powerful tool and ask, how can Wales, in developing a new curriculum, benefit from the political and cultural advantages of bilingualism? Muririd Hopwood's image of a prism yesterday with the light travelling through, offering a sea of colour, is extremely powerful, like all of Muririd's images. The new curriculum and its positive emphasis on languages offers significant opportunities, and we need to ensure that this emphasis sees the light of day in all of its colourful glory. I'm pleased to say that we have an exceptional panel to discuss these questions this morning, experts that have directly contributed to the curriculum, in addition to individuals that have specialised in early years, sign language, and the field of teaching language to adults. And I'm extremely proud of this esteemed panel: Eleri Goldsmith, Anna Vivian Jones, Ellen Davies, Helen Prosser, Sally Durbridge, Helen Williams, and Amir Davies Rana. That sounds almost like an army rather than a panel, but every panelist have been directed to speak for up to 7 minutes, and I have been asked to bring any presentations that goes beyond that in a positive manner, to ask them to come or to bring their presentations to a close. So we'll listen and discuss for up to an hour, referring to the audience for questions. You have an opportunity to pose questions to the panel by using the Q&A box at the bottom, in addition to using the chat if you wished to comment. I very much hope that we will be able to hold a lively discussion, and I will also be turning to questions in order for you to ask. Please also remember to tweet about the symposium using the hashtag #TrwyBrysmIaith. We will therefore begin with Eleri Goldsmith, who is the head of curriculum development with Welsh Government. Eleri led the group which developed the AOLE, Language, Literacy and Communication, a curriculum for Wales on behalf of Welsh Government. And before joining the Welsh Government Education Directorate just over a decade ago, Eleri was a teacher and head of department. She's therefore a very qualified person to begin our discussions today. A warm welcome, Eleri. Thank you. So I have been asked to speak about the curriculum for Wales. Following a review of the Professor Graham Donaldson with regards to curriculum and assessment in Wales, the journey of reforming the curriculum quite seriously in 2015 with the document Successful Futures. I have been part of that process for some 4 years now. And the Curriculum for Wales framework that was published in January of this year is a testament to the hard work of many people, including practitioners from all sectors, Estyn, the regional consortia, and other experts from Wales and beyond. The intention is to change the education system in Wales from a narrow focus system that is steered by performance to one which focuses on the learners and led by purposes. In addition to an assessment and evaluation system, we have a wider agenda for reforming education in Wales, and also includes fairness, well-being, teaching and leadership. The Curriculum for Wales guidelines and the framework which the schools will use to develop their own curriculum for teaching and learning from 2022. The 4 purposes are the starting point and the aspiration. The aim being is to support every learner to be ambitious and able, to be ambitious and creative, to be principled and knowledgeable, and to be healthy and confident. And one of the attributes of being able is to communicate effectively in English and Welsh. Another characteristic that defines the framework is the emphasis of pupil progress. The curriculum guidelines describe progress principles for the whole curriculum and also for the 6 AOLEs. These principles talk about how learners make progress in their learning, which then leads to realizing the 4 purposes. This will be incorporated in a statutory body when the bill comes to light. And so progress has to be an integral part of the teaching and the learning and at the root of planning the curriculum in every school in Wales. Learning descriptors are also included in HOLE, giving points of reference for progress during the learning journey from the ages of 3 to 16. Language literacy and communication brings English, Welsh, and other international languages together in one area of learning experience. In the new curriculum of WAVE, oracy will still be considered as a skill that is just as important as reading and writing. The curriculum encourages learners, schools and communities to appreciate all languages. This includes English and Welsh, of course, and also it includes modern foreign languages, classical languages, languages of the home, and also other community languages. There's a need to take advantage of the skills and the knowledge that children have in one language when learning other languages. There are a number of strategies and initiatives that already contribute to these developments. A fair start is the programme for early years and also for families with children under the ages of 4 that target some of our most deprived areas. And the Sure Start teams ensure that they look at language and oracy. One of their main roles is to support placements and parents to develop the children's oracy skills. The foundation phase was introduced in 2010 for children between the ages of 3 and 7. In the foundation phase, learners are immersed in activities that relate to languages that are planned to support developing their oracy skills. The literacy and numeracy framework was introduced in 2013 to improve the language and learning right across the curriculum. And from the outset, oracy was included in the definition of literacy side by side with reading and writing. The framework has now been updated to reflect the new curriculum. Oracy has also been included in the current study programs. Normally, every learner in the last year in Key Stage 2 and 3 will be assessed through teacher assessment. In English, it is equal with regards to writing, reading and oracy. And in Welsh, oracy is 30%, writing 30%. In GCSE, current GCSE Welsh, oracy counts for 30%, and in the English in Wales, it's 20%. The aim of the strategy 2050 strategy is to have 1 million Welsh speakers. This will ask for an increase in the numbers who receive Welsh medium and bilingual education. Changes to the curriculum will offer an opportunity to ensure that every learner in Wales in future will be able to develop their language skills through the number of Welsh and to use them socially and also in work. There's a statutory requirement for local authorities to prepare a Welsh in education strategic plan to show how they can improve Welsh medium education in their areas. New regulations are being created for plans which from 2022 will be asking how will we ensure more opportunities for pupils to use Welsh in different contexts within school. The Language Charter was introduced as part of a national programme by Welsh Government in 2016. The aim of the Charter is to increase the informal use of Welsh, to nurture positive attitudes towards the Welsh language and to inspire them to use them in all aspects of their life. This year's pandemic has clearly shown the importance of health and well-being. It's essential for people to learn. And children and young people, if they don't feel comfortable and safe, then they will not learn. Communication and health and well-being go hand in hand. Effective communication enables us to express ourselves, to be open to other people's points of view, and to nurture healthy relationships. Learning also it has society coordination, and it enables you to become confident and empathetic members of society. Oracy skills offers people to be able to learn to read, and it also leads to positive outcomes in schools. Effective language skills help learners to make sense of concepts right across the curriculum, to try and reason or to analyse information. Developing opportunities to hear and to speak the language within education is essential in order to develop proficiency, especially when it's to do with a specific language. We have to support every child to reach their potential in languages and through languages. Thank you, Eleri, for setting the context in such a comprehensive way and also within the time limit. So thank you. You've certainly set the context. Our second speaker is Anna Vivian Jones. Anna works within the ERU Consortium in the curriculum team, and she was vice chair of the Language Literacy and Communication Group. Prior to this post, she was a highly respected head of modern languages at Ysgol Gyfun Gwyr in Swansea. Welcome, Anna. Thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to you about the place of languages in the curriculum for Wales. Teaching in this curriculum will be disseminated across 6 areas of learning experience, and they shouldn't be seen as an aim in themselves, but rather as a media to enable schools to realise the vision of the 4 purposes that Eleri mentioned. And it's not difficult to see how this area will help learners to make progress towards those 4 purposes, because ambition of the languages, literacy and communication is to nurture learners that are confident in using English, Welsh and at least one other language, who also take pride in their Welsh identity. They embrace a bilingual Wales and are proud of their linguistic diversity and the cultural diversity. And also that they understand that languages lead to a feeling of belonging and is the key to understand populations and communities across Wales and the world. So how do you go about realising this aspiration? Well, the first step for schools is to understand that the linguistic landscape of Wales is becoming more and more varied, and it can be quite complicated. If we take the secondary Welsh medium sector as an example of this, if you go to a school in the north east, you will see that 99% of the pupils come from totally Welsh-speaking backgrounds. But if you go to a similar school in the southeast, then you will see 99% of the pupils do not hear the Welsh language at all outside of school hours. This variation, even within just the one sector, is quite extensive. And in addition to that, of course, we have schools in Cardiff, for example, where 3/4 of the pupils do not speak English or Welsh at home. The starting point for those schools is to actually identify the linguistic landscape in order to be able to plan a curriculum that meets the needs of their learners in this field of work. We heard quite a lot yesterday about new ways of thinking about learning and teaching languages, and languages literacy and communication invites us to adopt a new attitude. And I am now going to talk about some 5 elements. Firstly, whilst languages up until now have tended to be taught as separate disciplines, the curriculum for Wales brings languages together. And the most important thing to understand in this field is that it's based on the preposition that any learning in one language, whether that be nurturing vocabulary, developing an understanding of grammar, developing skills or an appreciation of literature, that any teaching can support teaching in every other language. Bringing every language together in this way puts an emphasis on transferring knowledge, skills, and understanding from one language to another. Secondly, it is a requirement of this curriculum to learn about languages. Sharing constant messages across the area and how languages work will facilitate the progress of the learner in every language. There will be an opportunity to understand the structure of languages better by building on the similarities, the links, and also the differences between them. We also see this in some schools that learners have an interest in the evolution of languages, and they enjoy seeing the place of the Welsh language amongst the story of languages in the world. It's also important for them to understand that they're actually adapting the language for the needs of society, and that can also be part of that evolution by being creative in their use of the language. Thirdly, the statement that languages link all of us together leads us to focus on relationships. We've already spoken about the relationship between languages and each other, but also need to understand about the relationship between language and culture, and that's key in preparing our learners to become citizens for Wales and the world. As was mentioned a number of times yesterday, there will be an opportunity to reflect on their relationship with languages, will lead learners to develop a positive image of themselves as users of those languages. One boy in year 9 did state in a school last week, "I don't speak any languages, but I am learning Spanish in school, and I'm pretty good at Welsh." Wouldn't it be wonderful if he, through this curriculum, could take pride in his varied relationship with these 3 languages, and he could say, right, I speak 3 languages, firstly English, then Welsh, then Spanish. Fourthly, even though a number of primary schools are already introducing a 3rd language, it will now become a requirement for learners to show progress in an international language in the primary sector. Schools will have to give consideration to which language they will choose and why. We also have to remember that there's not just adding a 3rd language, but adding another language into a bilingual context. And so, beginning with what the learner understands about languages already will be key. And lastly, new skills will appear in this curriculum. As language teachers, we are familiar with the normal language of reading, listening, reading, writing, and speaking. But what about the skill of negotiating between 2 languages? Well, the skills of bridging between languages, mediation, and translanguaging appears in this AOLE. And even though children and young people in our schools do mediate and translanguage, and they do that naturally in their daily lives, do we actually identify that? Do we celebrate it? Do they understand that this valuable skill is in their possession? And are we giving an opportunity for learners to show progress in these skills? And also, what is their potential for including other community languages, such as sign language, etc.? Including these skills that have been added to the cyfr, as was stated yesterday, makes the curriculum for Wales relevant, ambitious and contemporary. It invites practitioners across the area to work together and to imagine a new future with regards to learning and enjoying teaching languages to learners. And the question that we all need to ask is not how will it be if we do things better, but how could it be if we did things differently? Thank you. Thank you, Anna. A number of questions there for us as a panel to discuss, and for us as attendees, or participants, to discuss in the questions later on. So thank you. We'll now turn to our 3rd speaker, Ellen Davies. Ellen now teaches English at Ysgol Gyfun Llangefni. She's a leader in the area of languages, literacy and communication for the GWE Consortia and has co-led the pioneers in this area with Larry Goldsmith. And we've already heard from her. She represents literacy, English and bilingualism in this area of learning experience and former head of Ysgol Dyffryn Conwy Llanrwst. Welcome, Ellen. I'm not sure whether you have unmuted. Thank you. There are a number of buttons that I have to press. It's a pleasure to be able to say a few words and to add and to build on what Anna has just presented for languages literacy and communication AOLE. Anna has spoken quite a lot about the concept and what is important, that languages link us together. And also, she's mentioned the 4 purposes and the importance of linguistics in developing the context of languages literacy and in a multilingual context and developing a relationship with languages. I'd like to focus on the remainder of the statements and what's important in this area, and I'll refer to English specifically. In reforming this area, we had to look at the experiences and the expertise of our pioneers who were working in this area and those who inspired us. And that meant that we had to prove and consider and see all of the different contexts with regards to Welsh and English and bilingualism across Wales. As someone who has an educational background and a leadership background and professional development, in a bilingual context, I'm extremely glad that the focus is on bilingual within this area of learning and that we've looked at English and Welsh side by side and not separately. In developing 2 of the concepts with regards to what's important, we considered them as the way of the dualism, the links between listening and reading and the links between speaking and writing. The bread and butter of communication in languages and literacy, and also across the curriculum. There's an important connection between this area of learning and also actually using these transferable skills in order to meet the 4 purposes in English and Welsh. In researching 2 different curriculum in other countries, the cyfr was very influential. And rather than looking at oracy, writing and reading, that gave us an opportunity to strengthen the focus on listening and speaking, which is extremely important, and to consider the 4 linguistic elements and also the different links between them. That meant that we have developed a link between understanding and receiving information in order to interpret that information, and also between listening and reading, and also the communication and communicating that orally and in writing. And here are the 2 statements of what's important when it comes to understanding languages and expressing ourselves through languages. We were eager to think about these statements being held as some sort of a cwtch, as an embrace in these 2 statements about what's important, that languages are linked to one another and literature inspires the mind and inspires creativity. They are not separate statements, but statements that link skills and experiences within and through languages. The situation of the Welsh language and English will be different dependent on the linguistic landscape and the context of the placement and the individual learner within those places. It's important that we use this AOLE to respond to the needs and the aspirations of the young people in those communities and to aim high. There is a challenge there, and the language continuum has been considered in order to respond to the challenge and to ensure the depth with regards to these different learning contexts. There was an opportunity to consider English and Welsh within one area of LE rather than looking at them separately, and to teach those different linguistic contexts right across the country was quite a unique element of this work. English is the norm. We can think about discussing culture and linguistics in Wales, and there was an opportunity to actually have an effect by listening and by inheriting information about Welsh and also other international languages. We've benefited from considering Welsh in that context rather than in its own linguistic kingdom, and I think that's a strength. We had an opportunity as we go to design a curriculum to be able to do that in the classroom. There is a challenge as we change our mindset and ensure collaboration within and across the linguistic disciplines in one area of learning and communication, and developing a vision together will be key as we move forward to planning and realising a curriculum for our schools. We have a special place in our hearts for the force concept, so what's important in this field of work. We were inspired by this on a number of different occasions by the pioneers and the experts who motivated us. And when we considered creativity and literature, one motivation, of course, was when we look at Welsh literature. That's what inspired our minds and awoke the dragon in all of us, and ensuring that we gave an important and prominent place. Not just is this important as a concept, but also as an inspiration to develop skills of the trainees when it comes to reading, writing, listening, and that every learner has a right to that. Making sure that creativity is an important part is something that's extremely important to us. There has been a tendency, especially recently, as learners become older, to focus, especially in the English, on the analytical and the evaluation, and to miss those opportunities to develop creativity. When we were creating this MCAN, we also did some research with the national literacy about the effect of reading for pleasure, and also when it comes to the well-being elements of writing. I am glad of the work that the pioneers have done. We all went on a journey, researching into what's important, and there's certainly fire in the bellies of all of us when it comes to looking after the future of our children and young people, and how that led us to see what's important in this area of learning. Thank you. A number of interesting and powerful and exciting comments there with regards to how this area of learning is developing. We'll now turn to our fourth speaker. Sally Durbridge manages services for those with sensory impairments for Carmarthenshire County Council. Prior to this post, she worked as a teacher for the hard of hearing on behalf of Carmarthenshire. She is former chair of BATOD, the British Association of Teachers of the Deaf, and a member of the Wales NDCS Advisory Committee, chairing its Education and Training Committee. Warm welcome, Sally.
Diolch. Well, bore da pawb. Good morning, everybody. Within this short presentation, I'm going to talk about British Sign Language, or BSL as the language is commonly known, and look at the status of the language within current and future educational practice. British Sign Language is a rich, expressive and fascinating visual language. It is the language of the deaf community, a community which has its own set of social beliefs, behaviours, art, poetry, history, and values, which all create a sense of identity and belonging. It has its own grammatical structure and is the most common form of sign language in Britain. In Wales, there is no recognised Welsh Sign Language, but it is possible to teach BSL through Welsh rather than English. BSL is a unique language, not dependent on nor strongly related to spoken English, but like spoken English, there are accents, regional variations, and colloquialisms. It is a visual gestural language where meaning is conveyed through gesture, facial expression, lip pattern, and body language.
And that really, it's panned out to be true.
There are around 7,000 deaf people who use BSL as their first language in Wales. As well as in schools and educational settings, employment and the workplace, and homes and communities, there are a growing number of examples in media. We don't have to look any further than the Welsh Government daily COVID-19 bulletins. What a wonderful celebration of diversity, equality, and multilingualism. In 2017, we were presented with the much acclaimed short drama, The Silent Child. And we know there are assigned theatre, cinema, and media productions. For example, on the 12th of December, the National Museum for Wales is hosting a multilingual version of Sean Corn a'i Ffrindiau, which includes an option to participate through BSL. So what are the opportunities to learn BSL? Given the fairly rural nature of Wales, it can be a challenge to find a suitable course in some areas. We know that some schools, colleges, and higher education providers run BSL courses. Deaf clubs can offer opportunities to learn BSL and be immersed in deaf culture. There are a number of charitable organisations, such as the National Deaf Children's Society, Wales Council for Deaf People, Action on Hearing Loss, and Signature, who offer a range of options to learn BSL, some of which include accredited courses. And of course, more and more online courses are becoming popular, particularly at this moment in time where we are not really able to leave our homes. However, for children, opportunities are more limited due to age restrictions and ability to travel. So moving on, if we now focus on deaf children and young people, what numbers are we actually talking about? The Consortium for Research into Deaf Education reported that in 2018, there were at least 2,625 deaf children in Wales. So what is the status of BSL in current educational practice? Well, BSL is the first language for a small percentage of deaf children and young people. In Carmarthenshire, this is just over 2% of all children. Some deaf children use BSL as a second or additional language, and again in Carmarthenshire, this is approximately 6% of all deaf children. The teaching of BSL is not a mandatory part of the mainstream school curriculum. Teaching BSL as a language in its own right tends to be limited to specialist schools for the deaf. Within teaching and learning, technical and subject-specific signs are taught to promote access to the curriculum. Some schools have specialist provision, units or resource bases for deaf pupils, which support the educational and social inclusion of these pupils, including those who use BSL. Inclusion in mainstream lessons is often facilitated by a communication support worker or teacher of the deaf, who enables access to communication. Opportunities may exist for all pupils and staff to learn BSL. This is often via lunchtime or after-school clubs. And we know that some pupils do learn BSL as part of their Duke of Edinburgh Bronze Silver Award, but that learning usually takes place out of school. So, looking to the future, the introduction of the curriculum for Wales from September 2022 will require and enable schools and funded non-maintained settings to design their own curriculum. Ilari's already referred to the areas of learning. The LLC area of learning will support learning across the whole curriculum and enable learners to gain knowledge and skills in Welsh, English, and international languages, as well as in literature. This will bring new opportunities for all pupils to be challenged, inspired, and motivated to learn a third or subsequent language, such as BSL. The Welsh Government group leading on this AOL has recommended that additional guidance be developed to help schools include BSL in their curriculum design. And in March this year, a group with expertise and experience in teaching BSL began work on that guidance. The guidance is being developed both for BSL as a first or main language for deaf pupils and for BSL as a third or subsequent language for others. The guidance will be published for feedback in 2021. So in summary, the guidance will show how BSL can contribute to learners' development across the purposes of the new curriculum. It will encourage learners to step beyond familiar cultural boundaries and develop new ways of expressing and negotiating meaning in an inclusive deaf and hearing global society, addressing issues such as disability rights, minority languages, recognition of BSL, and communication through technology. And what a wonderfully positive note to finish on. Diolch.
Well, diolch yn fawr iawn, Sally. Thank you very much.
Sally.
Again, presentation illustrates the significant opportunity that the new curriculum offers, and the sort of significant opportunity that the new curriculum offers across languages, because it is about the Welsh language and the English language, but it isn't only about the Welsh language and the English language, it is about languages, and is enriched and is particularly exciting because of that. Diolch yn fawr iawn, Sally.
We'll now turn to our next speaker, Helen Williams. Helen is the Head of Training, Development and Learning with Mudiad Meithrin. She leads on numerous exciting schemes that relate to having a qualified and upskilled workforce, and projects that relate to language development, supporting work that relates to developing a new curriculum. So plenty of responsibilities there for Helen. Warm welcome, Helen. Good morning, and thank you for the welcome. Well, the intention of my presentation this morning is to look at some of the main developments that we need to consider when developing childcare and Welsh medium education services during the early years. One of the successes of the efforts in safeguarding the Welsh language over the last decades. The contribution of the Mudiad Meithrin can be considered as a way of measuring the developments, as the Mudiad is the main agent in the work of facilitating, supporting and providing care and education opportunities in the early years through the medium of Welsh. There are a number of additional support services within the provision from informal groups, and that are aimed towards parents, carers who wish to transfer the Welsh language to their children, such as the mother and baby groups. On the one hand, these services provide services for Welsh-speaking children because the parents do transfer, and on the other hand, these also present Welsh language to children who don't speak Welsh at home. And so through the mother and baby groups, the nursery groups, nurseries, the Welsh groups, such as the Club Cwtch, there are 1,000 different or varied placements that come under the umbrella of Mudiad Meithrin. As Mudiad, we believe passionately that every child in Wales has the right to a quality care and education provision through the medium of Welsh, whatever their background, language, needs, or where they live. It's therefore essential that we work with parents across Wales to support their choice of Welsh medium education for their children, and that we train a workforce that can work confidently in Welsh. By opening more Meithrin groups and by working together, we are confident that this will help to create 1 million Welsh speakers by 2050. And so with these three priorities, rights, confidence and training, I wish to look through the language prism this morning and to reflect that colourful light in this area of work. The Immersion Method is the method that is used by Mudiad Meithrin in order to present the Welsh language to young children. And as we know, young children are also busy in learning a language and are learning about the world around them. The scheme, Croesi'r Bont, Crossing the Bridge, has been created in order to meet these requirements, ensuring correct language patterns are presented to these young children and support the linguistic transition efforts between the groups and school. The scheme began back in 2015 in Denbighshire, when an opportunity was seen to create a structured and relevant scheme which would present a language on a regular basis in every group or cylch, whatever their linguistic level. Today, it's now a national scheme with almost 100 groups part of the scheme and specific officers in each county across Wales providing support and guidance for those placements. The scheme introduces a package of language resources which concentrate on the daily. It presents songs. Singing is important in any Meithrin cylch, and the third element is the language development assessment, which will identify the further support that an individual or the cylch needs. Even though Croesi'r Bont has gained significant ground over the past 12 months, we are eager to continue to improve knowledge and information about the immersion method. And one vehicle of being able to do that is through our academy we have. And as a result of launching Iaith, which is the vision for the coming 10 years, and which started in 2015, we had an opportunity to try and upskill our workforce through the medium of Welsh for the early years workforce, and we did that by establishing an academy. Last year, around 1,500 individuals received training on different elements and the responsibilities that relate to the sector. And so the aim of the academy is to provide improve skills amongst the workforce, and also there's a linguistic element that relates to the work, because the mission of the Mudiad Meithrin is that every child should have access to care and education provision through the medium of Welsh, and shouldn't the same be true of the adults as well? Core to the future and the continuation of our sector is recruiting and retention of our early years workforce. And back in Iaith Pawb in 2002, when there was a true lack of opportunities to gain qualifications in the field of childcare through the medium of Welsh, and during that time, the Welsh Government, as they were called at the time, they did have a national training scheme with the aim of qualifying 200 individuals in gaining qualifications through the medium of Welsh on an annual basis. Mudiad won that tender under the brand Cam wrth Cam, and this led to drafting and unique resources which were new and that were validated by standardized validation bodies. So confident Welsh speakers and learners were brought together to the scheme, and linguistic support was provided for those who were wanting to improve their Welsh language skills. We invested in creating a team of national assessors who are responsible for teaching, assessing and standardizing work of the students, and we considered that as an innovative and pioneering investment. More recently, we'd had to respond to try and mainstream the Welsh vocational provision, and the Mudiad came to an agreement with Iaith to provide an apprenticeship scheme on the ACT framework in 2019. We have 40 new apprentices beginning on this course, and we will move on to the higher levels in January. And so we're looking forward to the future with confident that we're giving the strong and robust linguistic foundation for the young children in our care, and to give them confidence to speak the language. So we train and help our staff to develop their professional skills as far as they can, and also to support future workers as we try and reach the 1 million Welsh speakers by 2050. Thank you. Thank you, Helen, and it's good to hear about those important and exciting developments from the Mudiad Meithrin, which of course feed into the new curriculum and the opportunities there. We now move from our youngest learners to the older learners in the company of Helen Prosser. Helen is the Director of Teaching and Learning at the National Centre for Learning Welsh, where she has responsibility for all aspects related to teaching and learning. She's renowned for her pioneering work over a number of years in the field of learning Welsh to adults, and she continues to be a Welsh tutor. Welcome, Helen. Thank you, David, and good morning. And if I can say just how much I've enjoyed listening to this morning's contributions and seeing some exciting aspects of the new curriculum. Now, we're a sector that sits outside of the school curriculum. So what I'd like to do this morning is to give you an overview of our work by focusing largely on the teaching and speaking the language. So we do have a curriculum within the sector, a curriculum that's based on the CEFR, the Common European Common Reference of Languages. And if you're familiar with CEFR, our examinations and our course books do carry the CEFR name. I don't know how much significance that holds for our learners, but what's important in our national courses is that we lead our tutors to lead the learners to become confident speakers. We have 4 levels, the entry, the intermediate and the higher. And the aim is to create a process and to make that process as simple as possible. We've heard from other speakers this morning about making the links between languages. We also need to show the links within a language. And that's our aim, to do it in a structured way and to build on it in a rational way. Having said that, in using that method, one has to be extremely careful to recycle the language constantly, and we do that on formats of dialogues, and we get advantage of to try and nurture the oracy. Yes, oracy is the important point. With the writing, then there to back up the oracy naturally, and then the emphasis changes as you move through the levels, but I don't have time this morning to go into detail on that. For anyone who opens a course, they will also see that vocab has an important place. And we categorize our vocab according to masculine and feminine, verbs, adjectives, and the other interesting. Yet, nurturing an awareness of language for those people who want to know about them and who will benefit from knowing about them without having a method that will be detrimental to anything else. And perhaps a question in becoming more fluent, and as those basic patterns, then perhaps vocabs becomes more important than learning difficult patterns of sentences and getting every mutation in place, because vocab is probably the key to the literature that we heard Ellen talking about, as well as music, programming, dramas, etc. So up until last September, the choice which our learners had was how many hours they would wish to spend in a class. Unfortunately, again, the majority still opted for the 2 hours a week. Our aim in the National Centre for Learning Welsh is to increase the number of contact hours. And as a result of the pandemic, one piece of work that was in hand, but has probably moved 5 years in a period of 5 months, is our blended courses, where every learner now has a choice to do 25% of the work online, and then to meet in a virtual class with a tutor and fellow learners. And here I'd like to pay tribute actually to any tutors, Welsh tutors who are listening this morning, who overnight changed from being tutors who were teaching in a class, teaching face-to-face 100% of the time, to holding 100% of virtual classes. So we had a seamless service right the way through the pandemic. So our sector has changed forever. From now on, there will be an opportunity to learn virtually or blended, or to return to a class. There will be a choice. Personally, even though how much I enjoy the challenge of teaching online, I am a 3D. I prefer 3D teaching and learning. I'm looking forward to returning to that. And one of the reasons for it is the importance of using the language. I've learned the Welsh language, and I had an opportunity to go to Aberystwyth University, and I was immersed like those little children in the TAV groups that Helen mentioned. Now a number of adults are now having an opportunity to practice with families and hopefully in their communities or in their workplaces. But the work of the centre to ensure that there's a provision for everyone to be able to practice their Welsh. There are many projects, and I'd like to speak about one specifically. I know David is helping with us, perhaps others may be out there, which is the speaking scheme, where we're asking people to spend up to 10 hours nurturing the confidence of learners, and more importantly, even though it's difficult at the moment, to help them to practice. Can I talk about my experience? Sian is my partner this year. Sian subscribes to Golwg, and we have a chat and we do the crossword. But Sian had a grandson last week, Gwylym Elfed. Sian will only speak Welsh to her grandchild. 2 years ago, my partner was from Poland. We went to 6 or 7 dramas. Do you remember those days of going to dramas? And she is a faithful member of Merched y Wawr. But in April of next year, she will begin an MA in Welsh in Swansea University. And I do know that she has a scholarly contribution to make. Why am I sharing these stories with you? Because I think it shows the potential for change. Of course, the future of our nation is down to young people and the language, but we mustn't forget the importance of adults. Adults very often are our influencers in society, and they are the nurturers and the formers of policy, and they are able to learn a language in a relatively short period of time. Of course, we in the centre can't provide those opportunities alone. We are totally dependent on partners in order to create appropriate opportunities. The word appropriate is intentional. Learners don't need bilingualism, but they need to hear the Welsh language that's understandable to them. And if I can talk about one other project that works, we work hand in hand with the Books Council Wales to have a series of books that are graduated. That means that we can create and have content, and we can include that in our resources. That has led to significant sale of books. Working with partners, providing for learners whilst at the same time strengthening the foundations of the Welsh language. What do learners think? 97% last year said that they enjoyed the Welsh language. More importantly, they agree that they are learning Welsh effectively. But you can always improve. We want more learners turning to become more Welsh speakers, and more importantly, to use the Welsh language. And I'd like to finish on a positive note. And from what I've heard here this morning about the potential of nurturing a delight in language through a curriculum, that can only facilitate and enrich our work. Thank you. Thank you, Helen. And as someone who has benefited from that, one of your schemes, and speaking to one of my speaking partners over the years, then I certainly approve what you've just mentioned there. And the opportunity and that vision that's core to the work of the centre, and which is a reflection of this move towards a culture that's open and celebrates languages. And I think that's come through each and every one of the conversations, that opportunity to celebrate languages and the exciting opportunities which will come as a result of the new curriculum to promote languages and the Welsh language as well, of course. But how do you promote and market that opportunity to create that million Welsh speakers? Not just a million Welsh speakers who understand Welsh, but a million speakers who actually use it on a daily basis. Someone who is doing this currently is Amir Davies Rana. Amir is a radio and TV presenter, and he's well known, and he now leads a project, #1million, that promotes the Welsh language in schools. A warm welcome, Amir. Well, thank you, David, for asking me to become on the panel. Well, this is going to be interesting and perhaps somewhat different to everyone else. A bit of a story. My background, I started this business, and also there were very little opportunity because of the lockdown. Because when I began this back in September 2019, it ran for some 6-7 months. So this is the story, how I began and how I developed the initiative and what I hope to do with it. So when I began, and that was back in 2018, just after Christmas, I started creating videos with Hansh, And that was seen by quite a few people, and I became a little bit more well-known. I was seen in the media. And then the Welsh Society in Pembrokeshire came to me and offered me an opportunity to present in a language fair in Pembrokeshire in Caerhilyn School for a period of 6 days. And when I had that offer on Facebook over Christmas, I thought, this is a bit different. Shall I take it on? Shall I do it? And I wasn't really sure whether that was the best opportunity for me to take. Anyway, I like to be busy. So I took that gig on and I went down to a school in Pembrokeshire for 6 days, 5 days in succession, and then the following Monday. And we did 1,400 pupils in 6-7 schools in the Pembrokeshire area, some Welsh schools, some English medium schools. And I presented in the language fair, and I held sessions and workshops on vlogging, just telling people how to plan and how to vlog. And we did that for some 6 days, and it was a pleasure to do, to say the least. It opened doors for me to go to more schools to put that offer in. And I then did a couple more schools over the summer, only 4, I think. I went to a school in Gwent, Gwent College. I went to a school in Llanelli as well, so not that many schools. And I didn't really advertise it at that time. I was still doing the work with Hunch, and I was still working for Tesco as well. And so after the summer, I decided to finish with Tesco because I did see an opportunity to do this and to create this into a business. So in the summer, I traveled for a month, and then I came back after spending all of my money, and I didn't have any money left. So I came into September and I thought, right, I'm not going to do this half-time, I'm going to do this full-time. So I released an advert called Croeso, 1 million, welcome 1 million, and that went on the social media. It went out on Twitter mainly, and it went mad. It went bonkers actually on Twitter. And from there, I had lots of offers from various schools. I had to create a database with these schools and to take the bookings on, of course, giving them information to schools and colleges and universities, and also brands and businesses were asking me to come in. So that was the biggest kickstart, really. Starting in September, well, right through September, I think I only went to one school, and that was Bro-Edern School in Cardiff, a first secondary school that I went to. So I released that video advertising it. And then in October, I was fully booked. So I had 2 days off. One of those days was on my birthday. So I did loads of schools. I went to Ysgol Gwyr, and that's already been mentioned. I then also went to Aberystwyth University as well. So I was really busy doing that, and that went on then into November, a little bit as well in December. And then in the new year, that was an opportunity to advertise it even more, and also through the work that I do. So that also fits in quite well. And so in March, I did a tour around North Wales, went up to the Gogs to see you. And I went to 8 schools in a week. And I came back home and I was ready to have a little bit of time off. And then the lockdown came. So that did cause some frustration. And yet I've been really busy throughout the year and trying to get and to pulling things together. I've worked with so many business brands, for example, the Mudiad Meithrin, which has already been mentioned in this session. So I'm now looking forward when I'm able to return and to work on this initiative to try and hold events within secondary schools rather than just giving presentations and activities. So with regards to the presentations and the sessions in schools, there are 2 parts to it. So the introduction, their presentation, that lasts about an hour to an hour and a half. We do things such as personal work, what I've done, video samples, watching things that I've done in the past. We also do a cool quiz. We do interesting facts about the language. So what we've been doing, we've been trying to make it cool to get the attention of children and young people, because there's no point going into schools if you're just talking about culture and history and language. It's nice to do a cool quiz and interesting facts, because children do learn if you do it, give it to them in an interesting way. And then moving on to activities, how to vlog. So in these sessions, we'd have tutorials step by step. I train them how to create a vlog and how they can aim towards doing something on Hunch, for example, or Don't Show on S4C, because there are lots of opportunities out there to create vlogs, but also to earn a little bit of money by doing it. So that makes them totally bonkers. It shows them a lot of interest once they hear they can make money out of it. So the challenges that I've gone through is advertising the work, especially with the work that I do with the presenting work. I would give leaflets out. When I began, I'd ring up the schools. That can be quite difficult, because you're also having to go into the school, but also I use the work that I do outside of school to get more, and it works well together. So that's the story of #1million. And hopefully, looking forward, when I'm able to return to schools, I don't think that will happen until March, possibly. I've thought about doing Zoom sessions such as this, but I just love going into schools. So I'll wait for that. And as I mentioned, I am now beginning to prepare. I've bought lots of different materials. I've bought a van in order to put all of the materials in. So I'm looking forward to return to the schools, and that's it from me. Great, thank you, Amir. I think your presentation and everyone else's presentations shows the level of energy and excitement from educators who are excited and want to teach people in different ways and different methods. And I know about your quiz. There are lots of interesting facts about history and culture and language, but they are presented in an attractive way for our learners and young people. So we're really creating that interest. So excellent. We'll now turn and to give an audience an opportunity to have a voice and to ask some questions. And some questions are beginning to come in, but can I encourage everyone to give their comments or questions in the chat or Q&A, and then we'll have an opportunity to speak to the panel. I have a question here in front of me, but first I think we'll turn, if I may, to Mryrid Hopwood, one of the motivators of this conference, if not the motivator, and I'll turn to her question. Is Mryrid online? Is she here? I'd prefer if you read your own question. Is Mryrid here? It's a bit like a seance, really, isn't it?
Diolch yn fawr iawn.
Are you coming via a prism? A colourful prism, I'm sure, knowing Mryrid.
Diolch yn fawr iawn.
Thank you all. I've certainly enjoyed this session enormously, and I've learned so much, and I'd love to know about Amir's quiz, but I'm too frightened to ask what the questions are. But what I wanted to ask, how much opportunity will there now be for people who represent what's described as different sectors, adults, the younger children, Welsh medium schools, etc., and schools who may not be Welsh media and modern foreign languages? What is the opportunity to come together? Because that's one of the excellent things when we were preparing the curriculum. We created a group who could come together, and hopefully that will not be lost, because there are so many things that we can learn from one another. Sally's work, Helen's work, the two Helens. Will this work continue? Is there any mention of that continuing? Thank you, Mryrid. I'm not sure who wishes to try and answer that question. Possibly someone from the consortia, or a Larry is the most appropriate, perhaps. There are plans currently in hand to establish, perhaps a network isn't the correct term to use, but opportunities for these conversations to take place at all levels, across the curriculum and also for specific elements as well. Obviously, the plans have changed due to the current situation that we've experienced this year, and it is an opportunity to include more people rather than your traditional networks with a number of people sitting in a room to represent. But we can now include more people in the conversations as we've done this morning. So more information will come soon with regards to how that will work. Excellent. Thank you, Valeri. Would anyone else like to add anything? I think the answer is quite reasonable. Anna, do you want to say a few words? And then we'll come to a number of comments. Anna next. I appreciate that question because it's a good point. We've seen during the 7 presentations today that there is a strand that flows through it to inspire people of all ages to learn and to use a language, whether that to put it in a purposeful context. I would appreciate an opportunity to do that. We in the consortia, we do have networks of teachers. And as the discussion around attitudes and new methods of teaching languages, and as those develop, there should be an opportunity because we have one national ambition in Wales. We are all working to the same aim. And so sharing expertise and ideas and practical ideas with regards to what's effective when it comes to inspiring a mere will of ideas and also the 2 Helens and others. And if we could come together and a central point where we could hold such discussions, I think it's an important point. Thank you, Anna. I'll turn to a few of the comments next, and I'll take a comment that has been made by Caris, and then a question from Ivan. Caris, next,
Diolch yn fawr, Dafydd, a gai
Thank you,
ategu
Dafydd,
at
and can I add
yr hyn oedd Mererid yn
to what
ei ddweud.
Mererid has just said?
Os gwelwch yn dda, gewn ni
Yes,
gydweithio, achos
please,
mae yna
can
gymaint o
we
potensial.
network? Because
Oedd
there's
mor
so much
braf gwrando ar
potential. It was
weledigaeth
lovely
gyda'r cwricwlwm
to hear about the vision of the new curriculum. And Helen, of course, Helen Prosser, she spoke about the future is in the hands of the young people. But I'd like to give a bit of a plug about all of the good work that goes on in the further education sector, and to remember the majority of our young people between the ages of 16 and 18 attend further education colleges. There's passion, there's vision, and there's an incredible amount of work happening. So thank you to the Coleg Cymraeg for the guidance and their input that has taken place over the past 2 years. So a bit of a plug really with regards to what we are doing in the further education sector. But also I'd like to earnestly ask to be part of these discussions in future, to look holistically from the cradle right through to the adults, because young people want to use Welsh in our colleges. They want to be able to continue with their education, and we have to ensure that there are clear continuity routes and purposeful continuity routes with regards to the Welsh language. So thank you, Dafydd. Thank you, Caris. Important points there. Important not just about the further education sector, but here we're talking about the changing the way we think about languages and the way we use languages. And almost there's little purpose in us doing that in the school sector unless it filters through to post-16 education and lifelong education and to the workforce and workplace and society in general. I know that's an enormous prize, but it's a powerful vision. We'll turn to a question, I think now, Ivan's question. I'll give an opportunity for those who wish to answer that question. And perhaps I'll turn to Helen Prosser first on this question. Ivan, your question, please. Good morning. Hopefully you can hear me. Sorry, I'd forgotten to press the mute. We've been using the Alter framework for assessing fluency in Welsh for some years now when it comes to the oracy and the writing. There was reference to the Sepher framework. Is it the advice of the panel that we should look at resources that relate to this in order to update this, the Cefr rather than the Alter? Perhaps I'll turn to Helen first and to those other people who may understand the difference between these. If Dr. Emyr Davies were here, I'd turn to him to answer because he's the expert in Alter. But no, Ivan, the Cefr gives an overview, and Alter used the Cefr as well in order to appoint there. So the WJAC are members of Alter, but the letters that they use are the same in Alter as they are in the Cefr. So to every purpose, they are using the same framework. Anyone else wishing to comment on Alter and Cefr? I think Helen's answer was clear and comprehensive. We have an interesting question here coming from an anonymous, but it's a very good question, and I'll ask it in the question it's been asked.
Presentations. So teaching Welsh and English together means doing both subjects in the same classroom in the same time slot question. Can you explain how it will work in practice? An interesting and challenging question there. I suspect we'll turn to some of our colleagues who've been working on the AOLE to offer some comments on that and open it up to anyone else who might like to do so. Might like to also answer. Who wants to start? Ellen, Anna? Anna.
Yes, I think this is a misconception from the messages that have been given out about the curriculum. It's more about there would be no expectation for an English teacher to teach Welsh or for a Welsh teacher to teach French or for a Spanish teacher to teach another language. What we're looking for is a common approach that language teachers across an area have important discussions about what they want their learners to learn about languages, and that they select that learning and then decide where is best for that learning to take place, where is it best for that learning to be transferred to another language and developed further so that the learning becomes increasingly more sophisticated. So we're talking more about adopting a common approach and giving learners the same messages about languages. And I think that without realizing it in the past, we've actually, by giving different messages about the way to learn languages, we've actually put obstacles in the way of language learning for learners. And this is an opportunity for discussions about what's important in this area to happen across all languages.
Thank you, Anna. I'll probably turn to Ellen maybe to offer a few comments on that. I think it does in a way reflect some of the challenges here. There's a change here, but there's also an issue and discussion probably that needs to be enhanced around professional development and the training of teachers, because it does strike me, if I were asked tomorrow to introduce students to German, not one of my languages, I'd see that probably as more of a challenge than even if were I asked to introduce them to Spanish or French. But Ellen.
Yes, it's part of the challenge for professionals working together to discuss their own approaches. I know as an area where we had disciplines from modern foreign languages, as it's taught at the minute, from Welsh and from English and from different school contexts, primary, secondary, looking at Welsh in all its different contexts, that it's about that discussion and having a common vision and working together to think about what's important for the learners in the context of their own schools and old classrooms. And there will be a different balancing act in terms of languages, but it's an opportunity really to talk about how languages are taught and to take from the best practices within and across schools and settings. I know in our own experience in Dyffryn-Conwy, one of the most important discussions we had was with our primary schools who taught both languages, Welsh and English, and embraced looking at a third language as well with their students, and were very passionate about the benefits of looking at languages together and building on that bilingualism and helping learners develop an enjoyment and an enthusiasm for languages that built on the bread and butter of what they could do in Welsh and in English. And I think it's phenomenal, but I think there's a real power and a real passion to be got from thinking about languages together, not directly teaching them at the same time in the same classroom, but building that dialogue and planning together. That's going to be really important.
Diolch, Helen. Maybe I could bring Sally in there to reflect on some of her experiences of teaching in a classroom where maybe from what you've described, you've been teaching BSL and English in a classroom setting, and how that has emerged.
Yeah. In terms of my own experiences, I mean, I'll hold my hand up and say I'm not a particularly proficient user of BSL. However, I do have basic understanding and ability to use it. I guess my perspective is more in being involved in that aspect within the role that I do. And it can be a real challenge where you've got one or more languages which are sort of working alongside each other. But I mean, you know, we very much, I go back to looking at sort of bilingualism within the home, and the fact that children and young people are actually able to sort of move in and out of different languages, and it can work. It can work well in educational settings. And of course, we do have those children who actually use what we would call sign bilingualism, where they are partly using BSL and partly using English, or indeed Welsh. So I think it's about being really well planned and really thinking about what you want your outcomes to be, and being positive about it.
Excellent, thank you, Sally. And what's interesting there, of course, is that there's a clear experience of those who have taught in bilingual contexts, where you have bilingual and trilingual and quadrilingual children. I chair a school in Cardiff where we have children in our nursery who speak 4 languages and code switch, and it's wonderful to see. Yeah. But that's a very real lived experience of speaking multiple languages and using words and concepts in different languages interchangeably and in a very sophisticated way too. And it comes back to Helen's point about sort of we don't celebrate some of those very high level skills that the children in various contexts have. So I think there are many things there. Mae 'na cwpl o sylwadau pellach gyda ni.
We have a couple of further comments. A question with regards to levels when it comes to measuring language. There's a comment that there's a need to look at measuring language, but in order to increase the use, isn't just being able to speak the language the important point, because proficiency in English isn't measured in the same way. And I think that's true. And then there are questions about how we can create that energy in order to support people, but also to acknowledge that developing skills. And that's why we have experts such as those that we have on today's panel. There is one specific comment from Gwleidyddol, and perhaps this is a request for you, Amir. Please find a way to do things in schools. And I'm concerned that young people are losing out on creative things, especially as well as the linguistic. The time in school is very short. And we're also seeing that, and there are discussions, aren't there, about extending the school time and doing imaginative and creating things around the school day. And that's also an opportunity. And then there's a question here from Wyn Thomas. And perhaps if I can turn to Wyn Thomas to ask the question about the history of the Welsh language. Wyn, are you here? Wyn is possibly here, but perhaps he may be on another planet, it sounds very much like. And if Wyn doesn't come down, I will have to ask the question. Wyn, are you here? No, it doesn't appear that we're able to hear Wyn. So his question, how much of a help would it be to teach the history of the Welsh language in the new curriculum to support the efforts of the organisations that have contributed to the conversation today? Where do we place the history of the Welsh language as part of our discussions? And perhaps I'll begin with you, Amir, because you are there presenting in schools, or you have been presenting in schools and hoping to do far more of that in the near future. Well, one main thing with regards to this initiative is trying to show that the Welsh language, through my career as a presenter and also through the media. And that's how I've developed a way of getting their attention, because that's the important thing. As I've already spoken, you have to get the attention of the children. It's like turning something to be fashionable. For example, Hanch does a really good job of doing that, just getting people's attention and getting the attention of different audiences to watch their content. And then you can see that people begin to watch more and more Welsh content. So with these presentations and activities, and especially the quiz, something I wanted to decrease was history, because when I was in school, I knew that what I didn't want to listen to was all of the history, culture, what people were coming into school and saying, and nobody really listened to them. And that's what children are like. They do have a low attention span. Having said that, there is still a need to hide the culture and the history, and that's what the quiz is about. So the quiz and the interesting facts have lots of questions about how many Welsh speakers are there in Wales, which county has the most Welsh speakers, etc. So it is interactive, and slides are also there on a PowerPoint. We also talk about the Welsh not, how the language has suffered at the beginning and how the language is increasing, and how it's quite strong. And actually, I do refer to the million of Welsh speakers. So that's how we've hidden much of the history, and just to make it real interesting for the children. So they probably don't realize that they're learning that much about culture and history and everything else about the language, but they are. And they leave these sessions, haven't learned so much. And the quiz probably lasts about 20 minutes. And then 20 minutes on the interesting facts as well. So that's how I get their attention, but also teach them at the same time. It's quite interesting there, Mir, because what you're actually talking about there is a very pioneering pedagogy. So it's the theory that's actually reflected in so you do it as a natural part of your initiative, but the sort of vision that you're talking about is there in the curriculum, developing skills. So we need experience. So I think there's quite a lot of excitement in all of this. Can I thank you all for your comments and your questions? They have been purposeful and interesting, and thank you to each of the panelists. There are loads of ideas here, lots of opportunities and challenges. And perhaps the difficult question for the panelists in finishing, during this next period where all of these opportunities and challenges, what one thing will you choose to prioritise? As a closing comment, which will bring us to the end of the session. And I think, Helen Williams, I'll turn to you first, as we haven't had a question directly for you. So I'll turn to you. So what, in all of this excitement, in all of these opportunity, and this extremely exciting time, what will be, or what should be the priority be? It's a big question. There are a number of different layers to this, and it's been such an interesting discussion for us as a Mudiad. As I mentioned in my presentation, we have three main priorities that I refer to. And of those, and perhaps they combine with my role with the Mudiad, we have a priority to continue to work with parents across Wales to support them to choose Welsh medium education. And our role within the new curriculum, I think, is essential, especially in supporting a sector that very often isn't maintained. And we do contribute to workshops, and we do influence the work that has an effect on the development of the curriculum, and ensure that that is sustained. Of course, training our workforce to be able to work through the medium of Welsh should continue to be one of the main priorities. So there may be two there. Yes, I think you may be, yes, but the priority obviously there would be the training. We'll go through then according to the order that we began. So Eleri, your main priority? So an appreciation of all languages in our schools and communities, and ensuring progress with regards to that teaching in order for these children to be able to learn languages and to be able to learn through the medium of those languages. I think that's probably two as well. Anna? I'm going to try and keep to one. What we are asking schools to do is to hold this discussion about what they want for their learners. Some schools will say, well, the first thing that we want as a priority is for pupils to take pride in their Welsh. Perhaps another school will be in a different context. We want to improve the oracy skills amongst our learners, so that they have a better voice to express themselves in society. So that would be the priority for me, that the discussions to decide on the vision, having understood the vision for Wales. So what is their vision for their learners in their context? To have an agreed vision, and then they can go about to plan the teaching and the learning for languages. Elan? I have to add to what Anna has just said, especially from leading a school to going back to working on the classroom floor. Holding that professional discussion between language practitioners is extremely important, and to keep the pupil at the centre, and to have a discussion with schools in different sectors, the primary, and to work on the transition onto the secondary school. But the discussion around that, I think, is extremely important. Sally?
Set out as a priority.
Well, definitely my priority would be to see that BSL becomes available to all pupils in all schools, that it becomes embedded within the new curriculum, and that it's used to sort of explore aspects of culture, diversity, equality across all languages, not just, defining it within BSL, and particularly the Welsh language, because, we are living in Wales. So I want people to become passionate about it.
Diolch yn fawr, Sally. Helen.
Thank you, Sally. Helen Prosser? I have an ambition and an aspiration, or a priority, if you wish. The aspiration, how can you make the Welsh language something that everyone wants? How do you, the act of learning the Welsh language, an act that becomes totally natural? We'll see whether Ant and Dec will do this on our behalf. And that means more than just the Centre for Learning Welsh. What is that recipe? But regards to a priority and maybe linked. Anna, in her presentation, spoke about that boy who didn't think that he had any language other than English. We need to work hard to persuade people that they are speakers and to then use that opportunity to use the language. That's the priority, because it's a psychological step forward to acknowledge that you are a speaker, not a learner. Thank you, Helen. And the last word from the panel, and we'll turn to Amir. And I can see in the Q&A, Amir, that we need 10 of you. So I don't know whether cloning is possible as a priority. But over to you, Amir. What would you give as your priority? Well, my priority would to order more of me to do the job. No, but one of the main things that I think is to work together, collaboration, because that's how we can get to the million Welsh speakers, to work together, not to work against one another and working in different ways, but to work together and to answer how do we get people's attention? Just to make the Welsh language cool. It's as simple as that, to get people's attention, and then we can move on from there. And one of the main things that I focus on, not just people who speak Welsh, but also to focus on learners. Those who only speak English, the learners, we need you all. It's part of the 1 million. Thank you, Amir. Your comments and Helen's comments are experiences that I've had recently of meetings where people say, oh, no, I don't speak Welsh. And then I greet them in Welsh, and then they respond in English, but it's obvious that they are Welsh speakers. And nurturing that confidence, I think, is extremely important. A number of important points have been made there. We need vision, we need training, we need discussion. We need to celebrate. We need to celebrate the Welsh language, and we need to celebrate our languages in its various and in its richness. We need to work together to collaborate, and we need to move towards where learning the Welsh language and learning languages is something completely natural, that is welcomed. So thank you. I've been inspired by this morning's panel. Thank you to each and every one of you, Eleri, Anna, Ellen, Helen, Sally, Helen, and Amir. I'm extremely grateful to you. I'm grateful to Linwen for the work in presenting this session, for translating, for those who are listening to the translation. And please remember the next session for the language prison will be held this afternoon. It will be held on language and translation, and that will begin at 2 o'clock. So hopefully that this session has inspired you, and there will be more inspiration this afternoon. Thank you all.